Okay, can start. Good morning, everyone. Welcome again for another LaSalle Sustainability Lecture Series. Today, we'll have the part 2 of our lecture on environmental applications of input-output models, entitled Monitoring the Environmental Pressures and Impacts of Global Economies using SCP-HAT. Before we start, let's take a moment for a short prayer.
Let me be the change I want to see, to do with strength and wisdom all that needs to be done, and become the hope that I can be. Set me free from my fears and hesitation. Grant me courage and humility. Fill me with spirit to face the challenge and start the change I long to see. Today I start the change I want to see. Even if I'm not the light, I can be the spark in faith, service, and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in me. Today I start the change I want to see.
Even if I'm not the light,
Even if I'm not the light, I can be the spark. Faith, service, and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in
Jesus in us.
Jesus in us.
Okay, so before we start our lecture for today, we'll have a brief introduction of the Sustainability Lecture Series, which is delivered by the Vice President for Research and Innovation of Salle University, Manila, Philippines. Let's all welcome Professor Dr. Raymond R. Tan.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this month's edition of the Sustainability Lecture Series. This lecture series is a joint initiative of the International Association of Salle Universities, or IALU, and De La Salle University. The series was launched in January 2021 to provide a platform to share sustainability-related initiatives done by different resource persons and teams in the different institutions that make up the global IALU network. Nearly 4 years on, this lecture series is still going strong. And the initial team, consisting of Professor Dr. Kathleen Aviso, the current Dean of the Gokongwei College of Engineering, Professor Dr. Alvin Colaba, the Director of the Center for Engineering and Sustainable Development Research, Chancellor Emeritus Dr. Carmelita Quebenco, and myself, has since grown, and part of the team now includes Professor Dr. Aris Ubando of the Gokongwei College of Engineering, our former PhD student and faculty member at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, Dr. Maria Victoria Nigo Sumagang, and the entire team of the University Sustainability Office of DLSU, led by Executive Director Antonio Nonoy Maralit. This lecture series is envisioned to continue to provide a platform for our joint work, inspired partly by St. Francis's Laudato Si encyclical in 2015, coupled with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Understanding our joint stake in the future and the challenges that face sustainable development, it is incumbent upon the global LaSallian community to share our knowledge and expertise and help drive green growth, not just within the LaSallian community, but for the entire planet as well. Thank you, and I hope you find today's lecture to be very stimulating. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tan. I would like to announce the presence of our Chancellor Emeritus, Dr. Carmelita Quebenco. Good morning, ma'am. Allow me to introduce our speaker for today. It is a distinct honor to introduce our esteemed speaker for today. We are privileged to have with us Dr. Ivan Henderson Ge, an associate professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at De La Salle University. Dr. Ke currently serves as the focal person for De La Salle University's role as a scientific partner, testament to his significant contributions in leadership. His research expertise lies in mathematical modeling and the innovation application of environmental assessment tools. Furthermore, his research interests centered on the vital fields of circular economy and energy ergonomics. Dr. Ge holds the distinguished position of Chair of the Mechanical Engineering Department. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Ivan Henderson Ge.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good day, good evening, wherever you are across the world. So today I'll be giving the part 2 of our lecture series. Part 1 was delivered by Dr. Raymond Tan on the use of input-output analysis. This one will be focusing on the tool of SCP-HAT. Actually, I'm the currently De La Salle University is a science partner of this tool, and I'm the point person to actually disseminate how to use or what's the importance of SCP-HAT. I'm also part of our research center, CESDAR, under the Energy Environmental Systems Modeling subunit. So first up is what to expect in this lecture is it'll be decomposed into 3 parts. I feel that we have to discuss some of these aspects first and what we can use up from it. Part 1 will be a bit of overview of SCP-HAT. Part 2 is on what are the data that we can retrieve from SCP-HAT, and then part 3 is how can we use them. So as a researchers or academe, how can we use some of this data into usable results or insights. So let's focus first on the part 1. Let's look at what are the current problems, why we need a tool such as this one, and a bit of background on what SCP-HAT is and what are their data sources. First and foremost, we have a significant problem in terms of our environment. Of course, we all know this. We heard about this. Environment has reached critical levels or beyond our safety operating levels. And the challenge here is how can we balance between economic growth and environmental sustainability? As you will see in this slide here, this is the trend between our economic growth and our carbon emission. And it has been strongly coupled together, meaning even if we aspire for more prosperity for our country, we may entail additional carbon emissions. And it will also entail additional environmental impacts, not only in terms of your greenhouse gas emission. Ideally, as a country or as an economic system that aims to become sustainable, because the challenge, if we don't become sustainable, we're gonna have significant impacts in the long run. It's gonna deplete the natural resources of our future generations, and it's gonna deplete the opportunities of our future generations. And it's actually possible in cases that we can decouple between economic growth and environmental impacts. As illustrated here in this data here, there are some countries where you could see the blue line represented by economic growth increasing already, and your carbon emission decreasing simultaneously. This means that it's being decoupled. And there are two scenarios that can be achieved in terms of decoupling. First is relative decoupling, where our impact is increasing at a slower pace than our economic growth. So in this case, they're still increasing, but they're not strongly coupled together. At least it's not, they're not strongly coupled together that they grow simultaneously. Whereas absolute decoupling happens is if our economy grows and our environmental impact decreases. This means that we can have a sustainable economic system without worrying about with at least less worry than in terms of our environmental impact. So what is SCP-HAT? SCP-HAT is short for Hotspot Analysis for Sustainable Consumption and Production. It was commissioned by the Life Cycle Initiative, One Planet Network, and the International Resource Panel. All of them are actually connected with your United Nations Environmental Program in terms of this organization. And it was developed through notable laboratories on industrial ecology. We have CSIRO from Sydney, and then WU Vienna, who actually developed this tool. And they have been coordinating with different regions as science partners, where the science partners is to give technical guidance on how to use SCP-HAT and at least promote it in terms of our government agencies and relevant stakeholders. So DLSU University is one of the scientific partners in the Asia Pacific region. In the Philippines, it's actually the only scientific partner as of the moment. In terms of the Asia Pacific, we also have partners in Thailand. I believe it's King Mongkut University and the Asian Institute of Technology. What SCP-HAT contains in its tool, it can provide environmental pressures and impacts of almost all countries or regions in the world. Not only on the economic level, but also in the sectoral level. So as a country or as a government, you could identify in your country which sector has significant contribution to a specific impact or pressures. So pressures are outlined as similar to how we use our resources. If we're gonna grow in terms of our economy, we're gonna use some of our resources such as material, land use, primary energy, and water. So we can see how it's coupled together with using our natural resources, how we're using a lot of our primary energy for, let's say, for economic activities and whatnot. Whereas impacts are more on the lower and the downstream processes, where we would actually damage the environmental systems. For example, you will find here climate change impact, species loss, and air pollution. So this will be more on the impacts to your environmental systems or societal systems, whereas the pressures are more from the upstream processes in terms of your resource use. And these are separated into two, domestic production and consumption footprint. Um, it's it it's represented as domestic production is represented as something like if a sector produces 1 unit of one economic value of a product or service, it will generate certain emissions or use certain resources, and that's domestic production. Whereas consumption footprint is more on the consumer side. So for example, for us, if we buy, let's say, 1 bottle of water, um, technically every from the start of the extraction of that bottle of water to us, there's a consumption of it. So there are entailed impacts and pressures of all the previous industries or manufacturing that process the bottle of water. So that's your consumption footprint. And with this aspect, we can see where our impact is. Are we the ones driving the impacts through our consumption, or are we the ones causing it through our production? Now, if you're gonna look at the technical aspect, how this was generated is through a combination of two frameworks, your multi-regional input-output framework and your life cycle assessment. Multi-regional input-output, or let's focus first on the input-output. Input-output framework is a transaction table given by governments on how industries interact with one another. So this gives you a bird's eye view of how one industry will interact with one another, what are the dependencies between sector A and sector B. Life cycle assessment, on the other hand, considers the environmental emission of a product once it's being processed and what is its impact. The beauty with life cycle assessment, as part of its tool, it can characterize your emissions into certain impacts. For example, if I emit 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide, it will result to an impact in terms of climate change. So it's a combination of these two frameworks. And the tool itself contains data for 164 countries, disaggregated into 120 sectors, covering a time frame from 1990 to 2024. So you could work a lot with this data. For our researchers, you could work a lot on this. You could look at the temporal, you could use in terms of forecasting or temporal analysis or panel data. And the tool itself it has its own data, but it also has a built-in report system. So if you're coming from if you just want to know the current state of a country, it will help you create these reports and these modules, which I will demonstrate later. So your question might come here is, how was SCP-HAT able to develop this database? Why would I trust it? So SCP-HAT actually conglomerates all of this data from different sources that are equally recognized across other disciplines. So in terms of economic structure, it gets its data from the Global Resource Input Output Assessment, or GLORIA. GHG emissions are from EDGAR, which is recognized as one of the good accounting for carbon emission. Energy production comes from the International Energy Agency. You also have your INFORM and then OECD. You also have other sources from recognized institutions such as UNIRP, UNDP, World Bank, and one is on a prominent journal article. So that gives us an overview of SCP-HAT right now. Next is what does it provide? So it provides us a monitoring framework. So that's one direct use of SCP-HAT. It gives us a general overview of a country's profile. For this case, of course, I'm coming from the Philippines. So I'm going to use the Philippines as a case study. You could see here on a dashboard what the current impact per capita of the Philippines is. So you could use this to compare between standards of your impact per capita. Well, you could actually also calculate in terms of your intensities for, let's say, for example, energy per GDP. You could actually use this as well. And you could see the trends of your environmental impact. For example, in this case, this is the material footprint of the Philippines. So material footprint is the total amount of materials you're using for your economy. So right now, it's actually a bit still coupled, like the green dotted dashed line is your economic growth, while the orange dotted line is your material footprint. So there's still coupling in terms of economic growth and material footprint, meaning if the country is still experiencing economic growth around 4 to 6%, you're gonna expect our material footprint will also grow by 4 to 6%. Where then you also have some other pressures such as water footprint, but I think the one that I would want to showcase is energy, because energy for the Philippines is a bit of, there's a lot of problems in terms of our energy right now. We need to have affordability and security. And the challenge here is, even as we grow our economy, as again by the green dash line, and your energy consumption is given by the black line, there's still significant growth. Um, Meaning we still need a lot of energy, and we need more fuel to sustain that trajectory. But it's not necessarily that we need to do it, that we need to just fuel our economy. We can still implement more efficient practices. For example, in the Philippines, we're already implementing the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, which promotes more efficient use of energy, which can affect how we use it in terms of our productivity, GDP per energy footprint. Right. Other impacts, you have your land use and species loss. I'll just run through this because I don't want to spend a lot of time in these slides. And then you also have your carbon footprint. You have your air pollution, marine eutrophication, and that's most of the pressures and impacts that I was able to showcase right now. As I said in the part 1 of this lecture, the advantage of SCP-HAT is we can narrow down which sector contributes to these impacts. And this can guide in terms of policy making, what sectors can we look into or investigate for improvement. So these are the 4 pressures that I showcased, and these are the top 5 sectors where majority are using. So well, I will apologize for the color coding as of the moment, because I wasn't able to correct this right now. I just use Excel to do this. But if you look at here, in terms of water consumption, of course, agriculture is top. I was able to clarify this with some of my fellow researchers. Yeah, agriculture will use a lot of water. Land use, also agriculture. Of course, you need significant land area. That's why there has been calls for more compact and efficient ways of doing agriculture. Primary energy, of course, it's the electricity or the utility sector. This utility sector will also include your power generating companies. Oh, I forgot to say, these are from a domestic production side. So these are from the industry that produces them. While they're producing this, they're using these resources. So in terms of the utilities, it's your electricity generating sector who contributes a lot. But notably, you'll see that construction sector also comes into play because of the, well, in this case, it's the fossil fuel needed for construction. Raw material use, a lot are from construction because of the concrete and cement that we need to build our buildings. And interestingly, when we had this workshop in Thailand to discuss with SCP-HAT, they presented this report on the ASEAN region. Interestingly, construction is one of the significant contributors among the ASEAN countries. One hypothesis is because the ASEAN is growing as a country and investing a lot on infrastructure. So we're experiencing a lot of this environment resource use in terms of our construction. And last, then in terms of impacts, we could easily identify as well. So for air pollution, agriculture has been identified, but I think I'd like to focus more in terms of the marine eutrophication and climate change. For marine eutrophication, where we dispose our or we emit some of our waste to the aquatic the marine bodies, it actually comes from the agriculture sector. This is actually somewhat I would say there is somewhat in agreement with a hypothesis here because some researchers have argued or actually discussed to me that the runoff from the agricultural sector um, actually leaking to some of our aquatic bodies. For example, in the Luzon region of the Philippines, some of this leak will go to the Laguna Lake. So it's resulting to marine eutrophication. Whereas in climate change, of course, electricity or the utility sector, being the power generating companies, also contribute to your climate change through your carbon dioxide emission. Transport sector will come into play as well. But again, notably, agriculture comes into a significant portion of the Philippines in terms of our top 5 sectors here. So I'll be showcasing right now a live demonstration of SCP-HAT. This one is a brief demonstration of SCP-HAT. I'm not going to explore a lot, but I'm just going to showcase here the 2 modules of SCP-HAT. So SCP-HAT can be accessed such as this one, scphat.org. But I think I better copy paste this to you guys so that you could use it as a bookmark or whatnot. Wait, let me just send that here. So you could use it as a bookmark if you want to retrieve some of this data. So this one is module 1. This module focuses on country profiles. So I already set this up for the Philippines, where I've already presented earlier the dashboard of different pressures and impacts of the Philippines per capita. You would also see here some reports about the Philippines generated here. And the temporal trend of the country through since 1990 to 2022. Okay, so this one is readily presented. It's actually intended for, let's say, stakeholders who just want to get a snapshot of what is the current state. And you would also see there are other indicators here. For example, you can also see in terms of the trade balances, imports and exports, where it's attributed in terms of these impacts and pressures. And the other one that I'm going to show is the module 2, which looks at the sector. So this is module 2. Again, to access modules here, you just drop this one down and then you will see module 1 and module 2. So module 2 is on hotspot identification or identifying which sectors would emit the most. So I already prepared this to showcase the sectors that results to impact of raw material use, climate change, land use, and output is your economic output actually here. So you will see how they compare between sectors, and the one that I presented earlier in terms of the pie chart is actually retrieved from this data. So to retrieve the data, you could actually use this one, download data for current chart. But if you really want to look into the data itself, like you really want to get the raw data, because some of us wants to see the CSV file, right? We want to get the CSV file so that we can work around with it, do some extra assessments with it, etc. So if you're gonna do the CSV file, you could do the data download and plug in here what you want to download, for example, what environmental indicator, socioeconomic indicator, etc., and what perspective. So this is important when you're doing the assessment. Are you doing a domestic production or a consumption footprint? And you could download this here. You can export all of it. It will become a clean CSV file, and then you can work around with it. So that's a demonstration of SCP-HAT. But again, one of the objectives here is the third part, which is, all right, so if I download the data, what can I work with it? So I've been working with some of our fellow researchers in the university with Dr. Tan and Dr. Aviso on the input-output framework. That's, again, the input-output framework is based on understanding how an economic system works from the interactions between one industry to another. For instance, if a plastic company is manufacturing this set of products of plastics, it will need to work with other companies, such as from the utility sector to provide its electricity, from the a bit on the fossil fuel sector to provide some of its raw materials, and some of it from the service sectors, let's say to provide financial services. So it's integrated as such, and it's demonstrated here where you have your sector 1, sector 2. This is a simplified version of how they interact with one another. And when they're doing their activities, they're gonna result to pressures and impacts. Of course, this is you're gonna have impacts nonetheless how much activity you produce. So it's a mathematical representation. So input output will do this in terms of a mathematical representation, and the output of each economic sector will result to your GDP, your gross domestic product, which constitute our consumption itself. So for us consumers, when we buy something, when we buy one product, it's because of the interaction of these sectors that makes it happen. And this interaction is standardized across all governments, I mean, all forms of government from different countries. So if you're from a different country, you could access it. I would believe that maybe 90 to 99% chance that you will find it. So in our case, we have the transaction table given by the Philippine Statistics Authority, and we pair it up with the data of SCP-HAT, which has your environmental pressures and your impacts. So what can we do with this? First, this is a simple assessment that I've devised. What if we change our consumption patterns? So what if we change our GDP? What if instead we focus more on the service sectors, what the services can do versus manufactured products? This can be realized in the form of, think of it like, for example, if you're gonna, it's like, okay, if you buy a furniture, that you're buying the manufactured product. But if you rent a furniture, you're more or less purchasing it from a service sector. That's a rough explanation of it, but I hopefully everyone was able to, I was able to relay my message accordingly. So it's a bit of shift from one sector's output to another to meet our daily needs or more than that. And scenario 2 is, what if we can change the interaction between the sectors? What if we can improve the consumption patterns of certain sectors? One example is if we improve the energy consumption of a manufacturing sector, what will that happen? So I'm going to show this in these two scenarios. I created this simple mathematical model via Excel, Microsoft Excel, and I used the framework of input-output framework. Of course, I'm not gonna give a deep dive of how the input-output framework will work or how it's connected, but it's basically we just pair it up with one another. So again, it's a simple Excel demonstration again. Let me share my model here. So this is a simple IO model given in the Philippines. Let me showcase here. So these are data obtained directly from the Philippine Statistics Authority, your transaction table, and your GDP and total output, economic output of a sector. And then we have your environmental impact here, given obtained from SCP-HAT. This is climate change. So I have here in scenario 1, this is where we change the GDP. What if we change the consumption patterns? So, for example, if we reduce our agricultural consumption by 5%, that means that we eat less or something like that. We could see changes in your, oh wait. Okay, I think it's too big. I need to make it bigger, sorry. It's not changing. It's okay, I'm gonna make it bigger because it's not reflected too well. Oh. Okay, I get it now. I'm gonna change the scenario. I think I fixed the axis. Let's just say, what if we consume more food? So what if we consume more food that will yield 10% increase in terms of your GDP? Let's say 10% more food. We could see how it changes our climate change in terms of our climate change emissions. So for example, we're gonna add more impact for our agricultural sector, and the mining sector would have 1% increase. Because this is because of the interaction between the agriculture sector and the mine and the whole system, which will yield to your mining sector. For another example here is we could do a double simulation. For example, we reduce our manufacturing sector by 10%, and then we increase our services by 10%. And you can see here the reductions between sectors and where our increase will be. Unfortunately, I made a mistake here that I didn't include the negative sign, but it's illustrated here where our reductions are and the total reduction of the economic system. And in scenario 2, this is where we change the interaction between the economic sectors. So as earlier stated, what if we reduce the energy input of the manufacturing sector from the utilities? So to do that, I just put a negative 10% here. But instead of, once we reduce the energy, what if we increase our materials there from the mining sector? A 10% increase from the mining to our manufacturing sector. So this, it didn't yield that much. I think I have to change this again. Let's just say we're gonna use more from the mining sector. Okay, I think it's not working. It worked last time. Here. I think this will be better showcase. Okay, this will yield some visualization. So for example, in this case, the manufacturing sector produces, the utility sector consumes more from the manufacturing sector by 10%. So what will happen there is your utility sector will have increased impact here, and then there will be ripple effects across the different sectors. It's not shown here, but I think I can do a quick illustration here, or quick movement of our decimals to portray some of this hidden figures. So you could see the ripple effects across your mining sector and the other sectors due to these changes. Okay. Right, now let me go back to the Excel file. Okay. So I think I'm gonna conclude this now. So in conclusion, well, I want to do these concluding remarks again. SCP-HAT is a powerful tool for environment economic assessments, and LaSalle, is a scientific partner of SCP-HAT. In terms of the monitoring case study I presented earlier, there's no absolute decoupling yet for the Philippines. Some are relative decoupling, but we need to do better because relative decoupling will still yield to increased environmental impacts. And notably, energy footprint and material footprint are actually strongly coupled with the Philippines' economic growth. And in terms of assessments, What I presented is the use of an input-output model, and this can be used as scientific basis, well, one scientific basis for our policies towards decoupling our economy with the environmental impacts. And some concluding thoughts here is, I think one matter that we have to consider in terms of sustainability is uh, popularly sustainable development is seen as this crossroads between the triple bottom line of social, environmental, and economic. But it has been considered that we should look at it this like, I mean, in this way. We have to consider that society itself is nested inside the environment and the economy is nested inside the society. That what we do right now actually damages the environment, which would actually affect us. Because if we use more of our resources, we don't do sustainable approaches, we're gonna damage the environment that supplies the needed resources and livable environment to us. So it will impact us in the long run. So I think these are my concluding thoughts. And I hope you were able to get some good insights from this discussion. And well, if you want to ask more than what I presented, or at least reach out to me after this discussion, you could email me via this email address. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ivan Ge, and for walking us through the SCP-HAT and providing live demonstration of a case study in the Philippines. So thank you so much for your expertise. Now we move on to the question and answer portion. So I would encourage our participants to ask their questions through our chat box or our Q&A button. Okay, we have a comment from Mr. Vincent Jans. So he is asking if we can email the slide deck for the presentation. Mr. Vincent, we would be posting the video in our social media. And you can access, of course, those information through our social media account. So for us to have the ball rolling for the Q&A, so Dr. Ge, given the complexity of global supply chain, how does SCP-HAT effectively account for environmental pressures and impacts embedded within the internationally traded goods and services?
Okay. So it does this by the framework of input-output framework, multi-regional I/O. So it uses the industry representation to capture embodied, your embodied impacts there as you consume your products. It's actually, how do I say this? It's based on the I/O framework and then a bit of working with your equations, you could determine the total impact. It's yeah, I think it's a bit difficult if I'm gonna explain it right now, but it's based on, if you want to know more, it's actually based on Leontief inverse matrix. So if you're doing I/O analysis, it's a play on how matrices work, and we could use that to determine the total impact throughout the trade. Yeah.
Okay. Just a follow-up question on that. Are there any inherent limitations in attributing these impacts to, say, specific countries of consumption or production?
Okay. Okay, so right now I would say the inherent limit here are the data that are provided, because it's actually dependent on your international organization, which are also provided by the countries themselves. I see that there can be cases where the country may not be reporting properly or whatnot. That can be a limitation in this aspect, but and another limitation of the SCP-HAT, what I'm looking at right now is it has data until 2022, and it can be extended beyond that to 2024, but that's more of a forecasted data rather than the true data. So those are limitations, but nonetheless, we have numerical data that we can work with to generally represent how economic system works and what's the environmental pressures and impacts. As my mentor would say, the modeling itself doesn't provide concrete results, but it gives us insights and what are the potential implications if we do in a policy. It still needs to be supported by other studies or scientific studies before we could translate all of these scientific findings into a policy. Oh,
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ivan. We have a question from Mr. Ivan Raidaluk. And he mentioned, thank you very much for your insight. And his question is, would you be able to provide reference for the IO model?
yes, I can provide. Okay, I think I'm gonna provide my paper because I already cited there. So I'm gonna provide my paper, and then you could check where I cited. It's the Leontiev 1970. So that's the most reference. But okay, I'm gonna get some of my papers here, and I'm gonna post it in the message board here.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Ivan. Again, from Mr. Vincent Jans. His question is about your recommendation on possible, simplest, easily scalable, and cost-effective measure to practice in all agricultural activities to significantly mitigate environmental impacts, especially GHG emission and eutrophication.
Interesting question. So, uh, I would say my limitation here is I'm not yet on the ground level of what the current practices are in the agricultural sector. Of course, we want to promote sustainable agricultural practices, but right now on my head, that's somewhat general, and I would have to defer this to a expert on the agricultural sector on how we can mitigate or at least improve some of these aspects. And this is the beauty with with the SCP-HAT. We could actually raise these issues, and then we have to trickle it down to the experts themselves of the sectors if what are the possible ways of mitigation, like maybe there's a specific practice that we haven't yet considered and we haven't yet adopted due to barriers. I mean, maybe political or regulatory barriers or economic barriers that can be supported through key policy plans.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ivan. I can see that our participants composed of majority are researchers and students, and I think they're very interested with the SCP hat. What advice would you offer regarding the navigating the tool, interpreting its output, and ensuring the robust application of its data?
Okay. I would say because there's a lot of data when you I think the first thing that comes there is there's a lot of data that is presented by the website from domestic production consumption footprint, and some of these terms are not easily I'd say not easily understandable because you have to understand what is the meaning behind them. I would say you could ask me. I mean, I would say you could ask us because we're science partners, right? The LSU is science partners. But an expert here, if you find someone who's doing industrial ecology, would have the scientific expertise to translate these terminologies. UNIRP is actually building on the terminologies themselves. If you look at Google search, some of these terminologies can pop up with the UNIRP, translating some of your scientific terms into more digestible terms. So I would say that's one way of understanding it. Second, and for if you're doing a research or a student, some of these terms are often used in articles, but I don't think there's a dictionary right now. I believe someone is making one, so if that pops up, hopefully I could read it and then share it next time.
Okay, we have a couple of questions in our chat box. One is coming from Dr. Carmelita Quebenco, and she mentions, "Thank you very much for your timely and interesting presentation. I wonder if we disseminate such info to government offices concerned for their information and references."
Ah, thank you for that question. So we're actually working, I mean, not yet. We already we tried disseminating it already once. And we've been referred to another government agency. So what we've done right now is we've been refining the discussions here. And we've been refining how to relay some of this information because there's a lot of data. So yeah, we've relayed it to already one government unit. Our next will be the one who's actually managing all of this data. So we're planning to email them and then hopefully we get a response and then see how we can work this out.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question from Mr. Ivan Ray Deluc. Does the model consider virtual concept? Say, for example, if we reduce our domestic resources consumption, but we replace them with imported stuff.
Interesting. Okay. I think the model doesn't consider this. It's more you need to dissect it more. No, I think it considers it, but if you're gonna play around with imported stuff or importation, I don't think the model has right now, or I haven't worked around it because when I'm dealing with importation in terms of regional, I'm actually using a different tool, which is PyMRIO. This is more of a Python based. So I don't think the SCP has right now. It only has the total traded volume, but it doesn't consider, for example, if you import it from a different country, for example, rather than importing from China, you shift your import to, let's say, Thailand or something. I haven't considered. I don't think SCP-HAT has that. It only has the total volume. But the background framework, the background structure, which is your multi-regional input-output framework, can calculate that. And that is given that I'm working right now with the Python code for it. I'm trying to work around with it so that I could get this. But I understand the relevance of the question right now as trade has been shifting and we want to see, and for us in the Philippines, it's important because we're more of a importer country. And once we understand how this works, we can now know where our environmental impacts are actually generated due to our consumption. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ivan. Another comment from Mr. Vincent Jans. He agrees, and the overwhelming data in the SCP needs simplification and generalization. Another comment from Dr. Raymond Tan. If there is enough interest, we can develop a tutorial on input-output models and SCP-HAT. So that's an interesting idea that we can consider. So, looking ahead, Dr. Ivan Ge, what are the most significant opportunities now or challenges that you foresee in the broader adoption and effective utilization of this tool, SCP-HAT?
Okay. So let's go to the challenges. It's often easy to identify these challenges. Challenge-wise, there will be some hesitancies to consider it because the data is derived from international organizations. So I think that those are the challenges on how we can relate because when we initially presented this with our government unit, one question was, where are the data sources? Fortunately, when I presented Edgar as a data source, they agreed that it's actually a reliable source. I'm just wondering in terms of the other impact categories, for example, land use, which is given by OECD, if the government agencies or relevant stakeholders will find it reliable or not. So that is the challenge I'm looking at right now. Opportunities wise, there's a lot of opportunities we could do with the SCP-HAT. First and foremost is policy making. When we're doing our environmental policies, we're often looking at the local level, at the local scene. We don't consider much on the macro level of the environmental impact. We might say, oh, let's promote collection of waste, right? We can just say, let's promote collection of waste. But sometimes we don't look at what has been generating this waste. Where is it coming from? I mean, in the Philippines, we have a problem in terms of plastic, which is realized through the extended, which is now being solved by the extended producer responsibility. But if we understand where it's coming from, how the interaction works, and in terms of the sectors, these are the opportunities we could use in terms of doing policy making on a systems perspective rather than a localized perspective. Okay.
Okay, I think that's all that we have for today. So it is an immense gratitude that we extend our sincere thanks to our speaker, Dr. Ivan Henderson Ge, for his insightful and comprehensive presentation today on SCP-HAT. So thank you so much, Dr. Ivan Ge. So to our participants, we are showing in our screen the QR code to give us feedback to further improve our delivery of the Salle Sustainability Lecture Series. And I thank you for attending for today's lecture. And we hope to see you again next month for our next lecture series. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Obando.
Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll be ending the session. See you next month. Bye-bye. Rio Del, maraming salamat. Thank you.